The house used to feel warm, even in winter. It was small, but it was theirs. When they first moved in after marriage, they did not have much furniture. The sofa was secondhand, the curtains were thin, and the kitchen shelves were almost empty. But they laughed often. They would sit on the floor and eat simple meals, talking about dreams and plans. Back then, he would come home early from work. He would ask about her day and listen. She believed she was safe with him. Things began to change slowly, in ways that were hard to explain. At first, it was just small things. He started coming home later than usual. When she asked why, he would say work was busy. He stopped sharing stories about his day. His phone was always in his hand, but when she came near, he would turn the screen away. She felt something was wrong, but she told herself she was overthinking. She did not want to doubt her own husband. When she found out she was pregnant, she hoped the baby would bring them closer again. She imagined him smiling when he felt the baby move. She thought he would become softer, more caring. For a few weeks, he did seem happy. He told a few friends. He even brought home fruit and told her to eat well. She held on to those moments and ignored the rest. But as the months passed, the distance between them grew wider. He spent more time outside. Some nights, he did not come home until very late. When he did, he looked annoyed as if the house was a burden. She tried not to complain. Pregnancy was not easy for her. She felt tired all the time. Her back hurt. Some days she felt sick and dizzy. Still, she cooked, cleaned, and waited for him to show even a little care. Sometimes she would sit alone in the living room at night, holding her stomach and whispering to her unborn child. She would say, "Your father loves you. He is just stressed." She was not sure she was saying it for the baby or for herself. Neighbors began to notice that he was often seen outside with another woman. They would talk in low voices when she passed by. She sensed their looks, but no one said anything directly to her. She trusted him, or maybe she was afraid to know the truth. The baby was born on a cold morning. The sky was gray and the air felt heavy. She went through hours of pain, but she stayed strong. When she finally held her child in her arms, tears rolled down her face. It was the purest love she had ever felt. She looked around the hospital room, hoping he would be standing there, smiling with pride. He did come, but he did not stay long. He looked at the baby from a distance, gave a short nod, and said he had to take an important call. She watched him walk out of the room while she was still weak and lying in bed. A quiet fear settled in her heart, but she pushed it away. She told herself he would change once they brought the baby home. The first few days at home were exhausting. The baby cried at night. She barely slept. Her body was still recovering. She needed help, but he was rarely around. When she asked him to hold the baby so she could rest, he would say he was tired from work. Sometimes he would get irritated by the sound of the baby crying. One evening, she gathered the courage to ask him directly if something was wrong. He did not answer at first. Then he said in a cold voice that he felt trapped. He said he was not ready for this responsibility. She felt as if the floor had disappeared under her feet. She reminded him that they had planned this child together. He shrugged and walked away. Winter grew harsher. The nights became colder. She kept the baby wrapped in layers of blankets. The heating in the house was not strong, so she would sit close to the small heater, making sure the baby stayed warm. He seemed even more distant than before. Some nights he did not come home at all. Then came the night that changed everything. It was very late. The baby had finally fallen asleep after hours of crying. She was sitting quietly, half asleep, when she heard the front door open. She felt a small relief. Maybe he had come home in a better mood. Maybe he would sit with them. But when she heard laughter, her heart started to race. It was not his voice alone. There was another woman with him. She stood up slowly, holding the baby close to her chest. Her legs felt weak as she walked toward the living room. The lights were on. He was standing there with a woman she had never seen before. The woman was dressed warmly and looked confident, almost amused. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence felt louder than any argument. He broke it first. He said calmly that this was his house, and he could bring whoever he wanted. She could not believe what she was hearing. She asked him, Her voice shaking. What was going on? He said he was tired of pretending. He said he wanted a different life. The woman beside him crossed her arms and looked at her with cold eyes. She did not say much, but her presence alone felt like a sharp knife. She begged him to think about the baby. She reminded him that it was freezing outside. She asked him where she was supposed to go at that hour. Her voice cracked as she spoke. She was not shouting. She was not angry. She was just desperate. He showed no sign of softness. Instead, he walked toward the bedroom and threw her small bag onto the floor. He told her to take her things and leave. He said he was done with this life and did not want to waste another day. Her mind felt blank. She looked at her baby, who had started to cry again because of the noise. She held the child tighter, trying to protect it from everything happening around them. She tried once more. She asked him if he truly meant what he was saying. She reminded him of their early days, of their promises. He avoided her eyes. The woman beside him whispered something in his ear, and he hardened his expression. Within minutes, he opened the front door and pointed outside. Cold air rushed into the house. The wind felt sharp against her skin. She could see her breath in the air. She stepped toward the door slowly, still hoping he would stop her. She hoped he would say he was angry and did not mean it, but he did not. He stood there waiting with shaking hands. She picked up her small bag. She wrapped the baby as tightly as she could in the blankets. Her body was still weak from childbirth, but she forced herself to move. Every step felt heavy. As she stepped outside, the cold hit her like a wall. The night was dark and quiet. The street lights flickered faintly. She turned around one last time. He was still standing at the door. For a second, their eyes met. There was no love left in his gaze, only impatience. Then the door closed. She stood there in the freezing night, holding her newborn child close to her chest. The house that once felt warm now felt like a stranger's place. The sound of the door locking echoed in her ears. Tears ran down her face, but she did not let herself break down. She looked at her baby and whispered softly, "It's okay. I'm here." Even though she had no idea where to go, she knew she had to stay strong. The cold wind blew harder, but she adjusted the blankets and started walking slowly down the empty street. Each step was painful, both physically and emotionally. Behind her, the house lights remained on, as if nothing had happened. That night, under the silent winter sky, she realized her life had changed forever. The street felt endless. The cold seemed to creep through every layer of clothing she had wrapped around herself and the baby. The wind was sharp, cutting into her skin, but she kept walking. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stand still. Standing still felt like giving up, and she could not afford to do that now. The baby stirred in her arms and let out a small cry. She stopped under a streetlight that flickered weakly. Its yellow glow barely touched the ground. She adjusted the blanket again, pulling it closer around the tiny face. Her hands were shaking, partly from the cold and partly from fear. She whispered soft words, tried to calm the baby, even though her own heart was racing. She looked around. The neighborhood was quiet. Most houses were dark. Curtains were drawn. Everyone inside was warm, sleeping, unaware of the woman standing outside with a newborn in her arms. She felt invisible, like the world had forgotten her in one single night. Her body still felt weak from childbirth. Every few steps, pain shot through her lower back and legs. She had not fully healed. She had barely slept since the baby was born. Now, the strength she was using felt like it was coming from somewhere deep inside, a place she did not know she had. She thought about going to a neighbor's house, but shame stopped her. She imagined the looks, the questions. She did not have the energy to explain what had happened. She also feared that someone might call him, and she could not face that again. She checked her phone. The battery was low. She had no credit left to make long calls. There were a few unread messages from earlier days that she had ignored while trying to fix her marriage. Now, they felt like reminders of a life that no longer existed. She thought about her parents. They lived far away, and it was too late to reach them. Even if she could, she did not know what she would say. She had defended her husband many times. She had told everyone she was happy. Admitting the truth felt painful. The baby cried again, louder this time. She felt panic rise in her chest. She rocked gently from side to side, humming a soft tune her mother used to sing to her when she was young. Slowly, the crying eased. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead, whispering promises she was not sure how she would keep. After walking for what felt like hours, she spotted a small building with lights still on. It was not much, but it looked warm. A simple sign hung outside, worn and faded. She stood there for a moment, gathering courage. Her pride had already been broken tonight. She told herself that asking for help did not make her weak. Inside, the air was warm. The smell of tea and old furniture filled the space. A woman behind a desk looked up, surprised to see her at that hour. When she saw the baby, her expression softened. The words came out slowly at first. She explained that she had nowhere to go for the night. She did not share all the details. She did not need to. The tiredness in her eyes and the baby in her arms said enough. The woman nodded and guided her to a small room. It was simple with 2 beds and a thin blanket, but to her, it felt like safety. She sat down carefully, her legs trembling as she finally allowed herself to rest. Once she was alone, the tears came. They fell silently, one after another, as she stared at the wall. She did not cry loudly. She did not want to wake the baby. She cried for the marriage she thought she had. She cried for the home she lost in one night. She cried for trusting someone who had turned away when she needed him the most. She checked the baby again. The tiny chest moved up and down in a steady rhythm. That small sign of life gave her comfort. She wiped her tears and told herself she had to stay strong. There was no other choice now. Morning came slowly. Pale light entered through the small window. The cold outside had not disappeared, but inside the room, she felt a little safer. The woman from the desk brought her some warm tea and simple food. She thanked her quietly, her voice low and tired. As she sipped the tea, her mind began to clear. Fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Determination. She could not stay hidden forever. She needed a plan. She needed support. Her thoughts kept returning to her brothers. They had always been protective of her. After her marriage, she had spoken to them less. Life had gotten busy. She had wanted to prove she could manage on her own. Now, she wished she had not created so much distance. She hesitated before reaching for her phone. Her hands hovered over the screen. Part of her felt ashamed. Part of her feared they would be angry with her for staying silent so long. But when she looked at her baby, sleeping peacefully, she knew she had to put pride aside. She sent a short message. She did not explain everything. She simply wrote that she needed help, and that it was urgent. The response came quicker than she expected. Then another message, and another. Her chest tightened as she read their words. They were worried. They asked where she was. They told her to stay where she was, and that they were coming. For the first time since the door had closed behind her the night before, she felt a small sense of relief. She was not alone, not completely. Meanwhile, in the house she'd been thrown out of, the night passed very differently. The man sat on the couch with the woman he had brought home. At first, he felt powerful. He told himself he had done the right thing. He said he was finally free. But as the hours passed, the house felt strangely quiet. The baby's cries were gone. The small sounds that used to fill the rooms were missing. He noticed the empty corner where the baby's things had been. He pushed the thought away and focused on the woman beside him. By morning, she was already annoyed. The reality of the situation began to show. The house was not as comfortable as she had imagined. The tension between them was thick. She asked questions about the baby and the wife. His answers were short and defensive. Back at the shelter, she packed her few belongings. Her brothers arrived before noon. When she saw them, she broke down again, but this time she did not feel alone in her tears. They held her gently, careful not to disturb the baby. They did not shout. They did not ask too many questions right away. They looked at her face, her tired eyes, and the newborn in her arms. That was enough for now. They promised her she was safe with them. As they walked out together, she took one last look at the small room that had protected her for the night. It was not much, but it had given her time to breathe, to survive. She did not know what the future held. She did not know how things would turn out. But as she stepped into the daylight with her brothers by her side and her baby close to her heart, she knew one thing for sure. She would never allow herself or her child to be treated like that again. Her brothers did not waste time. The moment they saw her standing outside the shelter with the baby in her arms, something inside them shifted. They had always seen their sister as strong, but that morning she looked tired in a way that hurt to watch. Her face was pale, her lips dry from the cold, and her eyes held a pain she had been hiding for months. They did not ask many questions right there. One of them gently took the small bag from her hand. The other placed a warm shawl around her shoulders. They walked her to the car slowly, making sure she stepped carefully. She was still weak, and they could see it in the way she moved. During the drive, she finally began to speak. At first, her words came out slowly, like she was afraid of hearing them herself. She told them about the late nights, the distance, the phone calls he would hide. She told them about the hospital day when he left early. Then she described the night he brought the other woman home. Her voice trembled when she spoke about the door closing behind her. Inside the car, there was silence after she finished. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels heavy. Her brothers looked straight ahead, their hands tight on the steering wheel and their jaws set firm. Anger was there, but it was controlled. They knew this was not the time to act without thinking. They took her to their home first. Their mother was not there anymore. She had passed years ago. But the house still felt familiar and safe. As soon as she stepped inside, something in her heart softened. It was the place where she had grown up, where she had once felt protected from everything. They prepared a room for her quickly. Fresh sheets, extra blankets, warm water. One of them went to buy baby supplies. The other made sure she ate something warm. She had not realized how hungry she was until the food was placed in front of her. For the first time in days, she slept without fear. The baby slept beside her, calm and warm. When she woke up hours later, sunlight filled the room. She felt slightly stronger, though the pain inside her chest was still there. Later that afternoon, her brothers sat with her in the living room. They wanted to understand everything clearly, not to judge her, but to know how to move forward. She told them she had ignored signs because she wanted her marriage to work. She admitted she had been scared to tell him earlier because she did not want to cause trouble. One of her brothers shook his head gently. He told her that family is not trouble. Family is support. Hearing that made her eyes fill with tears again. They asked her what she wanted now. Did she want to try to fix the marriage? Did she want to return? The thought of going back made her body tense. She remembered the cold look in his eyes and the sound of the lock clicking behind her. She slowly said she could not go back to someone who treated her and her newborn like that. Her brothers nodded. That was all they needed to hear. They did not plan to shout or create drama. They believed in doing things the right way. One of them had experience dealing with legal matters at his workplace. He began making calls, asking about her rights and the baby's rights. They gathered information quietly. Meanwhile, the man in the house she once called home was starting to feel pressure in small ways. Neighbors had noticed what happened that night. A few had seen her standing outside with the baby. People talk, especially in close neighborhoods. By the next evening, whispers had begun. The woman he brought home was not as comfortable anymore. She had believed his story, that he was unhappy and ready for a new life. But when she heard from others that he had forced out his wife and newborn child in the cold, doubt began to grow in her mind. She asked him questions he did not want to answer. He grew irritated and defensive. He said people were exaggerating. He said his wife had left on her own, but his tone lacked confidence. Back at her brother's home, she was slowly adjusting. She spent her days caring for the baby, feeding and holding the tiny body close. Every time she looked at her child, she felt a mix of sadness and strength. Sadness for the broken family. Strength because she knew she had to protect this small life no matter what. Her brothers kept her away from stress as much as possible, but they also believed she deserved justice and respect. After gathering enough information, they decided it was time to speak to him. They did not go in anger. They dressed calmly and went during the day, not at night. When they knocked on the door, he seemed surprised to see them. He tried to appear confident, but there was nervousness in his eyes. They asked to talk. At first, he refused, but when neighbors began glancing through their windows, he stepped outside. The conversation was not loud, but it was firm. They asked him directly why he had thrown out his wife and newborn child. He tried to shift blame. He said she was dramatic. He said he needed space. But the excuses sounded weak even to his own ears. Her brothers did not threaten him. They did not raise their hands. Instead, they calmly explained that what he had done was not just cruel, it was irresponsible. They told him they were aware of her rights and would make sure she and the baby were protected. They also made it clear that the community was watching. His actions were no longer hidden inside four walls. The woman inside the house listened from behind the door. Hearing everything, she started to see him differently. The charm he once showed her now seemed shallow. If he could treat his own child like that, what would stop him from doing the same to her someday? After that meeting, things began to shift. His workplace heard rumors. Someone mentioned the incident during a casual conversation. He noticed colleagues looking at him differently. The respect he once had began to fade. At home, the atmosphere grew tense. The woman who had once laughed beside him now kept her distance. She did not like the attention or the gossip. She realized she had stepped into a situation much bigger than she thought. Meanwhile, her brothers continued supporting her quietly. They helped her open a small bank account in her own name. They discussed options for work she could do once she recovered fully. They reminded her that she was not helpless. One evening, as she sat holding her baby near the window, she felt something new inside her, not just pain, but clarity. She understood now that love without respect is empty. She had tried to save her marriage alone, but marriage requires effort from both sides. Her brothers came to sit beside her. They told her that whatever she decided in the future, they would stand with her. No pressure, no judgment. In the days that followed, legal notices were sent calmly and properly. He was asked to take responsibility for his child. He was reminded that actions have consequences. The pressure grew slowly around him, not through shouting or revenge, but through truth. He began to feel the weight of what he had done. And for the first time since that freezing night, she no longer felt like a victim standing alone in the dark. She felt like a mother, a sister, and a woman surrounded by strength. The lesson was beginning to unfold, not through anger, but through steady and thoughtful action. The days that followed were heavier for him than he had expected. At first, he tried to act normal. He went to work, came home, and pretended nothing had changed. But the looks people gave him were different now. Some were quiet and curious. Others were cold. He could feel it even when no one said anything. Word had spread faster than he thought. In the neighborhood, people talked. They talked about the night his wife had been seen standing outside with a newborn in her arms. They talked about how cold it was. They talked about how no matter what problems a couple has, a baby should never be treated that way. At work, things were no longer easy. A few co-workers avoided sitting near him. Conversations stopped when he walked into the room. One afternoon, a senior colleague casually mentioned responsibility and family values during lunch. It was not said directly to him, but he knew it was meant for him. His face burned with embarrassment. At home, the woman he had brought into his life was changing too. In the beginning, she had enjoyed the attention. She liked feeling chosen. But now, the whispers made her uncomfortable. Friends asked questions she did not know how to answer. Some even warned her, saying if he could abandon his wife and newborn, he could abandon anyone. She started to notice things she had ignored before. His anger, his excuses, his habit of blaming others for everything that went wrong. When she asked him about the baby, he brushed it off. When she asked about legal matters, he became defensive. One evening, she asked him a simple question. She asked what would happen if she ever disappointed him. He laughed it off, but the question stayed in the air. She saw the answer in his eyes, even if he did not say it out loud. Slowly, she began spending less time at the house. She said she was busy. She stopped staying overnight. The house, which once felt loud and full, became quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt empty. Meanwhile, at her brother's home, she was slowly finding her balance. Her body was healing, and her mind was becoming clearer. She followed a simple routine. She woke up early to feed the baby. She took short walks in the morning sun. She rested when she could. Each small step made her feel a little stronger. Her brothers kept handling the difficult matters. They made sure everything was done calmly and correctly. No shouting, no public scenes, just steady pressure through proper channels. Papers were filed. Responsibilities were clearly stated. When he received the first official notice, his hands trembled. It was no longer just family conflict. It was real now. He realized he could not simply walk away from being a father. The paper felt heavier than it looked. He tried calling her. At first, she did not answer. When she finally did, her voice was calm but distant. She told him that all communication should go through proper ways now. She did not shout. She did not cry. That calmness scared him more than anger ever could. For the first time, he felt something close to regret. Not the kind that comes from understanding pain, but the kind that comes from losing control. He had believed he could decide everything. He had believed she would beg him to take her back. But she had not. He went to the house one night and noticed how different it felt. The baby's things were gone. The corner that once held tiny clothes and blankets was empty. The silence pressed down on him. He sat on the couch alone, staring at the wall, replaying the moment he had opened the door and pointed outside. In the following days, the woman he had chosen over his family finally confronted him. She told him she could not continue this relationship. She said she did not want to be known as the reason a child was left in the cold. She said she wanted peace, not drama. He tried to convince her to stay. He promised things would be different, but she had already seen enough. She packed her things and walked away without looking back. That night, he sat alone again. No wife, no child, no one waiting for him. The house felt colder than it ever had before, even though the heater was on. Outside his world, her life was slowly rebuilding. Friends who had once stayed quiet began reaching out. Some apologized for not speaking up earlier. Others offered support. She accepted kindness without shame now. She understood that needing help did not make her weak. One afternoon, she took her baby to a nearby park with her brothers. She sat on a bench, watching the tiny fingers move, holding on to her own. The sun felt warm on her face. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not include fear. She thought about everything she had survived, the loneliness, the cold night, the door closing behind her. She realized that moment, as painful as it was, had also freed her. She no longer had to wait for love that never came. Back at work, the pressure on him continued. His performance dropped. His focus was gone. A manager called him in for a conversation, not about rumors, but about responsibility and behavior. He left the office feeling smaller than he ever had. The community no longer saw him as a strong man. They saw him as someone who failed when it mattered most. Children played outside his house again, but he avoided looking at them. Every small laugh reminded him of what he had pushed away. He began to understand that lessons do not always come through loud punishment. Sometimes they come through quiet loss, through empty rooms, through the absence of voices that once filled your life. One evening, he stood by the window, watching the street outside. He saw families walking together, parents holding babies close. His chest tightened. For the first time, he admitted to himself that he had made a terrible mistake. But some mistakes cannot be undone by regret alone. At her brother's home, she tucked her baby into bed and whispered soft words of comfort. She no longer whispered out of fear. She whispered out of love and strength. She knew the hardest part was behind her. The tables had turned, not through revenge, but through truth, not through violence, but through consequences. And as both of their lives continued in different directions, one truth became clear. Cruelty may feel powerful in the moment, but it never wins in the end. Time moved forward, even when it felt slow. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly became months. Life did not suddenly become easy for her, but it became clearer. She no longer woke up with fear in her chest. She woke up with purpose. Every morning, she focused on simple things: feeding her baby, cleaning the small room she shared at her brother's home, sitting by the window and letting sunlight touch her face. These small moments helped her heal in ways she did not expect. Her brothers never treated her like a burden. They included her in daily life, asked her opinion, and reminded her that this was her home too. That support rebuilt something inside her that had been broken for a long time. She started believing in herself again. As her body fully recovered, she began thinking about the future, not just surviving, but building something stable for her child. With her brother's encouragement, she learned new skills she could manage from home. It was not easy at first. Some days she felt tired and overwhelmed, but every small success gave her confidence. She opened her own savings account and watched it grow slowly. Even small amounts felt powerful because they were earned through her own effort. She was no longer dependent on someone who could walk away at any moment. Her baby grew stronger too. The cries became softer. Smiles appeared. Tiny hands reached for her face. Every smile felt like a reward for everything she had endured. She promised herself that her child would grow up knowing love, safety, and respect. From time to time, memories still returned. The cold night, the locked door, the silence of the street. But those memories no longer controlled her. They reminded her how far she had come. On the other side, his life did not improve the way he hoped it would. Losing control had shaken him deeply. Without anyone to blame, he was forced to face himself. The house remained quiet. Too quiet. He tried to distract himself with work, but it did not help. The respect he once had was gone. People were polite, but distant. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. He tried reaching out again, this time with apologies. He said he had been confused. He said he was under pressure. He said he wanted to be part of the child's life. But his words felt empty now. She listened carefully before responding. She did not shout. She did not insult him. She simply said that being a parent means responsibility, not convenience. She made it clear that respect was not something she would ever negotiate again. Her calm strength surprised him. He realized too late that the woman he once ignored was no longer the same person. She had grown stronger in his absence. Legal responsibilities were handled properly and fairly, not out of revenge, but out of duty to the child. Everything was clear, documented, and steady. There was no drama, only reality. As time passed, he began to understand that the lesson he was learning had nothing to do with punishment. It was about loss. Loss of trust. Loss of family. Loss of a chance he would never get back. Meanwhile, her life continued to move forward. She began connecting with other women who had faced similar struggles. Listening to their stories made her realize she was not alone. Sharing her own story helped others find courage. She never spoke with bitterness. She spoke with honesty. She spoke about mistakes, pain, and growth. People respected her for that. One evening, as she rocked her baby to sleep, she realized something important. The night she was thrown out had once felt like the end of her life. But now she saw it clearly. It was the beginning of a better one. She no longer waited for apologies. She no longer hoped for someone to change. She had already changed herself. Her brothers watched her from a distance, proud but quiet. They saw a woman who had walked through darkness and come out stronger. They knew she would be fine, no matter what came next. The child grew up surrounded by warmth, laughter, and care. There was no shouting in the home, no fear, only steady love. That was the greatest victory of all. Years later, when she looked back, she did not feel anger. She felt understanding. Some people enter your life to teach you lessons, not to stay forever. And the lesson she learned was clear. Love without respect is not love. Power without responsibility is weakness. And strength is not shown by controlling others, but by standing up when everything falls apart. She had been pushed into the cold, but she found her way back into the light. And this time, she built a life that no one could take away from her again.